In 1919, British troops fired on a peaceful gathering in Amritsar. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre became the defining symbol of colonial violence in India, documented in every major history book and taught in every classroom. Yet 6 years prior to Amritsar, an entirely separate massacre took place. It resulted in a significantly higher death toll, but the details of this event remained absent from mainstream history textbooks for over a century. This chart shows the comparative scale of the two events. While the official death toll at Jallianwala Bagh is roughly 400, historical estimates indicate that over 1,500 Bhil tribespeople were killed in the massacre at Mangarh Dham. The geography of the event contributed to its isolation. Mangarh Hill sits at a remote, elevated intersection directly on the modern-day border between the states of Rajasthan and Gujarat. The exclusion of 1,500 deaths from the national record suggests that history is often shaped by those who control the archives. Mangarh Dham shows how a massive tragedy can be reduced to a local footnote, and why its eventual recognition changes our understanding of the colonial era. The Bhil community is an indigenous group native to the Aravalli and Vindhya mountain ranges. By the early 20th century, their lives were deeply intertwined with this rugged landscape, navigating it with traditional weaponry and generations of environmental knowledge. They were caught in a brutal economic squeeze. British colonial administrators and the local Indian princely rulers operated a collaborative extraction system. They imposed heavy agricultural taxes and forced the tribes into bigar, a system of unpaid labor to maintain their estates. A local social reformer named Guru Govindgiri launched the Bhagat movement. He utilized a spiritual framework, advocating for vegetarianism and temperance, to organize the fragmented tribes into a cohesive political bloc. Govindgiri instructed his followers to refuse the unpaid labor demands and reject the exploitative taxation system. This shared identity transformed the spiritual movement into a tool for widespread social defiance. This map shows the rapid expansion of Govindgiri's influence. You can see how localized spiritual gatherings quickly crossed the borders of Banswara, Santrampur, and Dungarpur, establishing a network of coordinated resistance. British authorities and the regional kings realized the threat. Govindgiri was actively constructing a parallel tribal authority, one capable of collapsing the local forced labor economy. In November 1913, tension reached a breaking point. Tens of thousands of Bhils migrated to the summit of Mangarh Hill. It was a defensive retreat, a massive but peaceful congregation intended as a standoff until their demands regarding the labor system were met. This diagram illustrates the military response. British forces formed a coalition with 3 princely states, marching units to encircle Mangarh Hill. Heavy artillery and machine guns were moved up the surrounding ridges, securing a massive elevation advantage over the densely packed, lightly armed crowd. On the morning of November 17th, the command was given. The combined forces opened fire on the trapped congregation. The bombardment continued for hours, devastating the men, women, and children on the hill. The deployment of heavy artillery against bows was a calculated choice. The coalition applied an overwhelming, disproportionate execution of force to guarantee that the tribal population would be too fractured to ever organize politically again. When British troops fired on civilians at Jallianwala Bagh, the news spread instantly, igniting national protests. But at Mangarh Dham, the political autonomy of the princely states meant that news of the massacre was contained within the local region, preventing it from reaching the national press. As a result, the events of 1913 bypassed institutional memory. The specific details of the 1,500 dead survived exclusively through the oral traditions and folk songs maintained by the descendants of the Bhil survivors. That institutional silence held for decades. It wasn't until the late 1990s that the descendants shifted their strategy. They moved from private mourning to public agitation, organizing formal petitions to demand that the state recognize the slaughter. Their pressure eventually produced a physical change in the landscape. In 2017, the state government approved the repatriation of the land at Mangarh Dham, establishing a national tribal museum and finally anchoring the memory of the event into the soil. The local campaign ultimately reached the highest level of the Indian government. In November 2022, the Prime Minister officially elevated Mangarh Dham to the status of a national monument. The initial exclusion of the Bhil casualties was a byproduct of a fragmented political landscape. But the victory at Mangarh Dham proves that a community armed with relentless generational memory can force a state to rewrite its national record.